our lives. And it's amazing, I suppose, that this has as much to do with anything with the technology that is packed into a cell phone now. Because it used to be, and some of you that you have, if you're under 25, maybe you don't remember this at all, but it used to be that we had cell phones, even before cell phones, though we had these thing called pay phones. But then when cell phones showed up, the primary goal with them was to talk on them. And you know what you could do with them? You could talk on them. And that was about it. Now, it's like our lives are lived out of our cell phones because it's, among other things, yes, you can talk on them, but think of all the stuff that you can do with a cell phone now. I mean, you can take a picture, you can do Google Maps so that you've got GPS built in, you can send a text message, you can send an email, you can make a video, you can you can check out at Sam's online, which you need to do that if you haven't tried that. You can order your lunch at McDonald's, so you can, all kinds of stuff that you can do with a cell phone now. And because of that, they have crept increasingly more and more and more into our lives. And because of that, what I'm getting ready to describe, it's not unusual that my experience is probably what some of yours has been. And by that I mean, back in May, we had gone to the beach and we were there for a week, and one evening I had taken our 3-year-old John over to the pier. And I've always loved going out on the pier, and this was down at Cherry Grove. I love going out on the pier. And so he's out there, it's just the two of us, and one of the things I'm doing is I'm taking some pictures of him with my cell phone while I'm there. Now there's a couple of instances where John has gotten up and he's on one of the elevated seats, and he's like leaning here where the top of the banister is, and so I'm kind of hanging out over here like with the ocean down there, trying to take a picture. Now, as I'm doing that, I want this picture, but I'm really nervous about that. And I'm telling you, my knuckles are white because I've got a death grip on this cell phone. I mean, I'm like, no wonder I can even press the button on it because I am so gripping this phone. Why? Because I am very concerned that it's getting ready to fall into the ocean. All right, and I'm concerned about that for a couple of reasons. It used to be, though, if you got a cell phone, the phone company would essentially give you one. Now you have to take out an equity line, right? So cell phones cost $1 million. The other thing is what I described a moment ago. So much of our lives are lived in and lived through. We're so connected to that device. And man, if you lose that thing, I mean, that's a real problem. And so you cling to it because it is so valuable to you. We cling to and we hold close to us the things that are of real value to us. Hold that thought for a moment as I say this. For the past number of weeks, we've been in a series, and today we're going to land the plane in a series that I've been calling Here Are Your Idols. And what we've been thinking about is this, that you don't have to be someone who has carved out of wood or stone or metal some sort of being that you say is a god and you just bow down before it in your living room or out in your backyard. Very easily, we can look at the Ten Commandments and talk about not having any graven images and say, well, I haven't done that. While in the same vein, it's possible you could still even be here as a follower of Jesus, seated in the pew of a Christian worship center, singing songs and hearing preaching and going to and doing all of these things, while at the same time there is something in your life, or there are things in your life where you have allowed God's place to be overtaken by something or someone else. And for the past number of weeks, we've been looking at some of those things. And hopefully, how you feel about the Lord, my hope is that your commitment to Christ is such that He's like that cell phone that I'm squeezing hanging over the pier, that He is so important to me that I don't want to lose grip, and I don't want Him the place that He has in my life, I don't want to give that up for anyone or anything. I hope that that's the case, but the reality is, very easily, we can lessen our grip and we can allow other things into His place. If there is anything, or if there's anyone that has crept into God's place in our life, well, then it's claimed the top spot. And if that's the case, if whatever that is the ultimate authority in our life, that means that God isn't. And if it's not God, then whatever is in that spot is an idol. Today we're going to be thinking about something that you might not have ever considered could be an idol in your life, and perhaps because of that, maybe it is the case that it is so commonplace. But here's the idol I want you to think about: your opinion. your opinion. It's entirely possible that even as a follower of Jesus, you might have elevated your opinion in life to be the ultimate authority in your life. And here's the truth. If your opinion is the ultimate authority in your life, do you know who isn't? God isn't. And if He isn't, then whatever you have put in His place, it's become an idol. You didn't have to use wood, you didn't have to use stone. Even out of your own opinion, you might have made for yourself a God. So here's the question. How can I tell if that has ensnared me in any way? How can I tell perhaps if I have made a God out of my own opinion? Look with me this morning to a passage where Jesus is encountering the religious leaders in Matthew chapter 15. Matthew chapter 15. We're going to start reading with verse 3. Matthew 15, Jesus has been talking and exchanging here with the Pharisees. And it says that He answered them, "Why do you break God's commandment because of your tradition? For God said, 'Honor your father and your mother, and whoever speaks evil of his father or mother must be put to death.'" That's mine and Caroline's favorite verse. Sorry. "But you say, whoever tells his father or mother, 'Whatever benefit you might have received from me is a gift committed to the temple,' he does not have to honor his father. In this way you have nullified the word of God because of your tradition. Hypocrites! Isaiah prophesied correctly about you when he said, 'This people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. They worship me in vain, teaching as doctrine human commands.'" Now, you don't see the word opinion here, but I believe what Jesus is describing here has everything to do with me or you or anyone, even someone very religious like the Pharisees, having elevated our opinion and given that God's spot in our life. How can you tell if that is you? First question, I believe, based on what Jesus is saying here, that you need to ask yourself is this: am I making God say something He hasn't? Am I making God say something that He hasn't? Now, we started in verse 3, but this passage actually starts back at the beginning of the chapter in verse 1, where we're told that Jesus was approached by the Pharisees and the scribes, and they've got a question. And the question is, "Jesus, why do you break the tradition, or why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders, for they don't wash their hands when they eat?" These disciples they're not washing their hands. Dirty fingers. Nasty. That's not right. And it's not simply, and their problem was not that the disciples weren't washing their hands. Their problem is they weren't washing their hands what they said was the right way. And the right way was, long story short, to pour water, because there's not plumbing at this point. And so you would take water, so if you've got a pitcher in this hand, you would pour water from the elbow down on this hand, and then with this closed fist, you would begin up here and work your way down and rub that hand with water. And then you would take this hand now that it's clean and then do the same on that side. That's the right way. And failure to do so is, well, you're not washing your hands. And the problem is not that the disciples had greasy fingers. It's not because they had junk all over their hands. It's because they didn't wash their hands the right way. Hey, Jesus, what's the matter? I mean, you and your disciples, you guys have got position. You've got influence. People are paying attention to you. Look at you. I mean, you don't even wash your hands the right way. And so Jesus doesn't respond directly to that allegation. Instead, He says, "Why do you break God's commandment because of your tradition?" So let me get this straight. Because of how you say things are, you wind up disobeying God so that you're in line with how you say things are. And then He gives them an example. In verse 4, He appeals to one of the 10 Commandments. And one of the 10 Commandments says to honor your father and mother. You know that. You could rattle this off. You've heard this 1,000 times before. You know this is on the top 10 list. One of the big, clear-cut commandments. As a son or a daughter, you are to honor your mother and father. Not just as a child, but throughout the whole of their life, you are to demonstrate and live out honorably and demonstrating honor to them. But here's what you've done. Jesus says, that you're saying to your parents, whatever benefit you have received from me is a gift committed to the temple. All right, so in terms of context, what's going on is, keep in mind, this is the first century. They don't have some of the social safety nets that we have here in the United States. There's not Medicare and Medicaid. There's not governmental assistance. And if you don't have means, there's going to be some hungry days for you. And if you don't have enough money to find a place to live, well, then the street is going to be your place to live. And there's nobody that's going to help you apart from those that actually just know you, and specifically those that are in your family. If you fall on hard times, the best hope, the best safety net that you have is going to be to lean on your family. But he's saying to these religious leaders, to these Pharisees and these scribes specifically, what you guys have done is, you know what God has said, honor your mother and father, but this is what you've done. You said, I am so religious. All of my bank accounts from Bank of America and Truist, from the credit union, all that stuff, yes, it has my name on it, but I put as a co-signer on there God. And I've said, this is money that is ultimately dedicated to God. So I can use it for the needs that I have, but everything else, well, that's kind of God's money. And so Jesus is saying to them, what you've done is to create this loophole where you can do whatever you want with this money, but you're going to allow your mom and your dad to be absolutely destitute. You've created this loophole, and you made this so that somehow you're still honoring them because you're saying that these funds have been dedicated to God? Really? Yeah, is that how we're supposed to be operating? He says in verse 6, he says, you're not honoring your mother and father. In fact, in this way, what you've done is to nullify the word of God because of your tradition. So, hearing this, you may say, well, what exactly does this have to do with opinion? He says, you have nullified this tradition. You have nullified this by this that you have created. This system that you have invented. So what they're saying is, Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. I pledged all my belongings to God and to His service. I can use them for whatever I want, but I can't give anything to you. I'm not at liberty to do that. And Jesus says, you're nullifying the Word of God based on stuff that you have invented, stuff that you have created. Now, again, you may be thinking, what exactly does this have to do with opinion? I don't see that word here anywhere. But let me ask you this. How do you define opinion? In your opinion, how do you define opinion? Well, if you would say it like I would, you'd say this. Your opinion is the collection of those things or specific things that are assessed by you to be true or right, and those positions are self-designated. What does self-designated mean? It means that you have decided this is how it is, and that ultimately, based on no authority other than your own, you have said, this is, that is. Let me give you some examples. Cherry Dr. Pepper Zero is the best drink ever. Unsweetened tea is the worst drink ever. There should be some amens to that. Let me say it again. Unsweetened tea is the worst drink ever. Thank you. Bluegrass is the best music. All of those are true statements. Every one of them. Cherry Dr. Pepper Zero is the best drink ever. Unsweetened tea is the nastiest. I'd rather drink from a pond. Unsweetened tea is horrible. Bluegrass, it goes without saying, it is the best music ever. All of those are true statements, in my opinion. All of those are true statements according to me. On no authority greater than myself am I saying that those things are true, that that's how it is. The Pharisees, though, are doing the same thing. In this instance, they're doing it about hand washing. On no authority greater than their own, they're saying, this is right, and anything else is wrong. Isn't that just their opinion? That's exactly what it is. Now, is there anything wrong with opinions? No, we've got opinions about everything. I mean, for some of you, your opinion right now is it's hot. Some of you are cold. Who makes the best mayonnaise? What's the best restaurant? What's the best color? I mean, we've got opinions about everything, and there's nothing whatsoever wrong with opinions, and there's nothing wrong with having these positions whatsoever. The problem is when you elevate those to a position that they do not deserve, so that you elevate that opinion to the ultimate authority in your life, so that it is your opinion that is ruling the roost. And if something is right or wrong, the ultimate authority, well, it's you and your opinion. If and when that has happened, what you have done is to shove God out. You've put your position, your opinion, in His place. And in doing so, you've made an idol out of what? Your opinion. Take any position that you have, anything that you might define whatsoever as an opinion, and ask this: am I saying or am I maintaining this position, giving it authority more than just me? Am I saying that this is ultimately right and this is ultimately wrong? That's a big statement, isn't it? Let me ask you this. Who ultimately gets to define what's in bounds and out? Who gets to ultimately define what's right and wrong? Well, if you believe this, then you believe that God is the one that ultimately gets to decide what is right and what is wrong. But if I'm putting things in those categories and God didn't say it, you know what I have done? I've elevated my position, pushed God out, and I've made an idol out of my own opinion. Well, how might this work? Let me give you an example. Some of you may remember the name Roy Clark from Hee Haw days. And if you don't know anything about Hee Haw, boy, you really missed it. I mean, you missed it. Anyway, so Hee Haw was this long-running show on CBS on Saturday nights. I just remember as a kid going to the fish camp, would come back and watch Hee Haw and Lawrence Welk. Those were the days, right? And so, might explain a lot. Anyway, I did enjoy watching Hee Haw. It was this just silly comedy show, slapstick, country music, just guffaw nonsense. Anyway, there were two hosts of the show, Buck Owens and Roy Clark. I didn't like Roy Clark. I never liked Roy Clark. And I'm not saying anything personally against him. I never was a fan of his. I respected the fact that musically he was very talented, but I just didn't like him. I really didn't. So I knew that. People in my family knew that. And so a few years ago, I don't know if it was for my birthday or for Christmas, but my sister gives me this package and I open it, and inside there is Roy Clark's autobiography. I'm sure you know what it looks like. I mean, I'm sure you've read it yourself. It's a page turner. Anyway, so I get that, and why didn't you get me this? And then she says, open it up. And I look inside the cover, and it's not just autographed, it is personally autographed. I don't remember exactly what it said, but it said something like, Michael, thank you for being such a fan, Roy Clark. I'm like, why? You know I don't like him. Why do I have his book? You had to go to some trouble and you had to go to some expense to do this. Why did you do that? I don't even like Roy Clark. At that point, she started laughing, and this is what actually happened. She had been at the dollar store. And in a book bin, there's a Roy Clark book, overpriced at $1. So she thinks, I can have some fun with this. So she buys that book, she brings it home, and she gets out a Sharpie. To Michael, thank you for being such a good fan, Roy Clark. Wraps it up and gives it to me. Now, here's the thing. It said Roy Clark, but Roy Clark didn't say that. Roy Clark has never thanked me for being such a fan. He never wrote to Michael Owens on anything. But it said so. Well, why did it say so? Because she wrote it in there. Listen, so many times we do exactly the same thing with our opinion. And what we will do is to take God's Word, and we are effectively writing something in there, and we're saying, that's how it is. Is it because God said it? No. It's because we said it. And what we've effectively done is to take our little Sharpie and write God's name on whatever our particular position is. If and when that happens, let me just be very frank, you have pushed Him aside and you've given His spot the ultimate authority in your life, the ultimate arbiter of what is and not, right or wrong, in bounds and out of bounds. You've taken it from Him and you've given it to yourself. So ask yourself, any of the positions that you maintain, any things that you say, well, is that an opinion? Let me ask you. Ask yourself, ask God to help you, am I making God say something that He hasn't? Am I going further than saying this is just my opinion? I mean, in my opinion, Dr. Pepper Cherry Zero is the best. But that's my opinion, and I know that. But am I saying that failure to accept that is wrong? If I get to that point, I'm essentially making God say something that He hasn't. And if that's the case, I'm robbing Him of His position. I'm putting myself in His place. There's a second question you need to ask yourself, and that's this. Who is most bothered if this position is not maintained? Who is most bothered if this position is not maintained? So whatever it is that your opinion, your position about whatever, who is most bothered if your opinion doesn't rule the day? Who is most concerned if your position, whatever that is, isn't what people are doing? Is it you or is it God? Now, think about what's going on here. You have these very, very religious guys, these Pharisees, and they are all in a tizzy. So concerned about the failure of the disciples to wash their hands the right way. Now, did God ever say, this is how you have to do it, and if you don't start on here and if you don't do that, that's wrong? No, God never said that. They did. And they go to Jesus and they say, what's the matter? Can't believe this. Washing your hands the right way. So this is just terrible. And their opinion about the right way, was that God's position? It wasn't. Let me ask you, do you think God was particularly concerned whether Peter washed his hands the right way? Do you think God was concerned whether John started with the right hand or the left? Do you think the Lord was concerned whether Peter had a little bit of dirt under his fingernails still? I don't think he was. But boy, these Pharisees were. Why? Because they've elevated their opinion beyond what it should be, just an opinion. They're saying this is how it is, and only God gets to say how it is. Does this type of thing happen today? Sure it does. And it is less the case now in some of these things, but some of you can remember what it was like, you pagans that went to the movie theater. Godless heathens. Now hear me, there's plenty of things that we have no business as believers watching and not entertaining ourselves with. But did God ever say it was a sin to go in a movie theater? Did you have a mom or daddy say that was? Sure you did. Some of you did. Even if you were playing cards, if you were playing hearts, playing spades, whatever. Sometimes some of you might have to sneak to do that because, man, that's wrong to do that. I can't believe you're doing that. What about those infidel churches not having church on Sunday night? Bless God, that's when it's supposed to happen. Did God ever say we had to? Why don't we go 3 times on Sundays? Why don't we just stay here all day? I'm good. I don't want to go on. Did God ever say that? No, but there are plenty that have said, no, failure to do so, strike. Well, music has been a big one. It's been a huge one. That's not in the hymnal. It's one of them new songs. Devil songs. Fanny Crosby didn't write that. Nobody named Fanny wrote that song. Not only is it not in the hymnal, I didn't even open my hymnal. Only pagans do that. Now listen, is there anything wrong with singing something out of the hymnal? No. Is there anything singing an old song? No. Is there anything wrong with singing a new song? I mean, so long as the words are biblically grounded, there's nothing wrong with it. But we need to understand that regularly this has happened. Too many times this has occurred where we've taken our particular opinion about things and we've elevated. And in failure to abide by that, we're saying, man, that is wrong. And we get all in a tizzy. But we need to ask ourselves, is God in a tizzy about any of this? Is God upset about this? Do you think for a moment that God, and especially based on Jesus' response to them, do you think God was at all concerned that God was somehow fretting, oh my goodness, I can't believe the disciples of Jesus aren't washing their hands the right way? Was God concerned about that at all? No, because He hadn't said that, they did. This wasn't His standard, it was theirs. And they were all in a tizzy because they'd elevated their opinion to God's position, and they never asked themselves, who's most offended if this position isn't maintained, me or God? Let me give you a more current example. It was a couple of years ago. This was during the summer of the George Floyd protests. A lot of upheaval in the country, and a friend of mine called me. He was on staff at a large church down in South Carolina, and they were having Vacation Bible School. And he was asking me, he said, I need your opinion on something. I said, what's that? He said, we've been having Vacation Bible School. He said, this was after the first day. And with everything that was going on, their church, the Bible school started like it has for so many. And among the things that they would do is to say these pledges, including the Pledge of Allegiance. And there were multiplied kids when it came time to say the Pledge of Allegiance that sat down. And so what happened is that there were people in the church that were there that day that started putting stuff on Facebook saying, man, these kids are out here disrespecting this country, and that's not going to happen again tomorrow, not on my watch. And he's like, we've got this boiling now. What do we do? I said, take the stupid pledges out. Let me ask you this. At the end of the day, what has God called us to get people to love this country? Or to love Jesus? Do you think somehow that only people that swear their allegiance to this country are going to wind up in heaven? I mean, is every knee and every tongue going to bow and confess that America is truly great? Is that what's going to happen? No, but everybody's going to stand before Jesus. Everybody's going to stand before Him, and it's going to be of concern what they believe, what they know about Him. And whether you like America or you liked Cuba or you like what difference does it make to God? Listen, I am abundantly grateful to be born here and blessed to be an American. And I realize that so much of what we have experienced is the direct result of so many families paying the ultimate sacrifice. And hear me in that, but I want you to understand this, that our ultimate allegiance as a follower of Jesus is not to this country, it's not to this state, it's not to this city, it's to Jesus. It just is. But yet all those people that were getting in a tizzy, and they were mad that some 8-year-old sat down during the Pledge of Allegiance. Do you think God really cared? I don't. In fact, in a Christian church, what place really does that have? I want people to pledge their allegiance to Jesus. If you want to say the pledge at school, if you want to say it somewhere, there's a place for that. But this is a place that's about Him. I don't want somebody that's coming to this worship center that's come from another country, that their allegiance in terms to a country is from somewhere else. That's okay. I want them to know Jesus. You should want them to know Jesus because that really matters. But there were a group of people down in South Carolina that were all in a tizzy. But God wasn't. But why were they in a tizzy? Because they'd elevated their opinion to the ultimate authority, making God say something that He had never said. And the chips were falling because of it. Listen, this doesn't happen because you sit down one day and say, you know what? I'm going to push God out of the top spot in my life. I'm going to say that it's my opinion that's the best. God, whatever. But Michael, he knows better. You don't consciously do that. But slowly, bit by bit, over time, our opinion gets on the elevator. And listen, because we've all got opinions. Those of you that know me and know me well, I'm as opinionated as they come. I really am. In fact, I've got the best opinions. But make sure they stay where they belong. And where those opinions belong is not in God's place. He is to be the ultimate authority in your life. And if there is anything or anyone, even your wonderful opinions that's got in there, whatever that is, you made a God out of it, and it's not God. It's an idol. Will you bow your heads with me?